Okay.
So, all right, cool. Well, Nicole, I guess I'll start peppering you with a few questions and then we'll see where the conversation goes. But just to sort of set the stage, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, the triathlete career you've had, and top line performance? Is that what it is?
Top line coaching
Top line coaching.
and specifically top line triathlon. Yes.
Fantastic. All righty. So
Yes.
let's get to the fun stuff.
Sure. So I was actually born in South Africa, moved to Canada with my family in the 1980s, and then came to Texas for graduate school. And have always been very athletic. My parents are both runners. My parents were like really high performance runners, ultra marathoners. So I grew up kind of in the endurance sports environment. And I picked up triathlon in college and just absolutely fell in love with it. And ended up kind of making it my career in terms of I went to school for educational psychology with like a focus in sports psychology, and as an aside to that, began coaching as well. So I coach athletes in running and in triathlon, and I also do sports psychology consulting. But another component of my coaching profession is that I also run a triathlon club, which is kind of becoming a bit more popular and common over the last few years, and especially since this whole COVID thing started. I think the club thing has become a bit more of a way for people to network and get together virtually
Yeah.
when they can't race in person, and there's a little bit more of kind of a community feel and a way of connecting with people via sort of club activities that can be either hosted online and so on. So my main focus at the moment is coaching athletes to be ready for triathlons when races kick back off again, and also for getting athletes into the club, networking with each other, sharing information, and so on.
Wow, that's incredible. And, one of the things that we talk so much at Play On about is this idea of how communities are built around sport. And
Yes.
it's a foundation, it's a pillar. In cities, we have professional sports teams. But, I think so often we get caught up in the notion of the big five. So basketball, hockey, football. Triathletes are a completely different world of their own. So I'm really excited to understand how you guys use the platform. But before we do that, for all the listeners that don't really understand the triathlete world, why don't you break it down from sprints to Olympics and then all the way up to the ultra marathons, and sort of give us a peek behind the scenes on what that life is really like?
That's such a great question. I'll try to boil it down.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, exactly. So triathlon in its like current form came about in the 80s. It's most people kind of see it as having grown out of the military community and some ultra dedicated swimmers, cyclists, and runners who got together as a small group and kind of competed with each other to see who was the fittest swimmers, bikers, or runners. And this whole notion of Ironman triathlon, which is sort of the brand that puts on races, came out of that sort of ultra athlete environment. But I think even before that, people had been putting together these multi-sport events where you swim and then you jump on a bike and you go and bike for a certain distance, and then you throw on your running shoes and you run for a certain distance. And so you can kind of break it into three different categories. The sprint distances, it's nothing like a real sprint. It's an hour or more.
It's way
But
worse.
it's way worse. Exactly. Sprint distances, and then Olympic distance, which is so called because it's contested at the Olympic level. And just to give you an idea, those distances are a 1,500-meter swim, a 40K or 25-mile bike, and a 10K or 6.2-mile run. So that's the quote unquote Olympic distance. And then the longer distances are the iron distances, or what has become known as sort of the brand name Ironman, either half or full Ironman. A full is 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, 26.2-mile run. And the half Ironman is half that distance. So many people who get into triathlon get into it because they've heard of the Ironman in Hawaii. I don't know if you're familiar with the video of, the people crawling across the finish line and, literally getting every last ounce of energy out of themselves to cross the finish line. That's a bit more rare these days, fortunately, but that's kind of what sparked everybody's imagination about Ironman and Hawaii, which is the World Championship race that is held every year. And, that really captured people's imaginations because it was such a huge feat, a huge accomplishment of endurance. And there's a phenomenal number of people who do it now. So it doesn't seem quite so, untouchable. It's actually very doable.
So I have to ask the question, Nicole, have you completed a full Ironman? And if so, did you get the tattoo?
Yes, I have completed a full Ironman, and yes, I have got a tattoo.
I love
yes,
it.
hilarious. That's kind of one of those, rite of passage things that people would do a race. Usually it's their first Ironman, and then they'd go and find a tattoo shop in town, whatever town it was where the race was being held. And so often those little tattoo shops advertise themselves as, we do Ironman tattoos after the race. I don't know if it's as popular anymore, but when I first started, which was in the early 2000s, that was the thing to do. So
Super
that's one
cool.
of, yeah, exactly. A thing that draws people to it.
I love it. I love it. So this
Yeah.
is going to be interesting, and I'm going to ask this from an athlete lens and a coach's lens. And so with triathletes or triathlons really making their rise in the 80s and early 90s, over the last 30 years, how have you seen technology in the bikes, the shoes, and the equipment evolve? And what has that done to the sport as a whole?
Great question. It has evolved tremendously. I think if you were to put somebody in a time machine from, the 80s, fast forward to now to just see, what the technologies are, what the bikes look like, what kind of computerized, even electronic shifting on a bike. I'm sure, years and years ago that might have seemed so revolutionary. But yes, huge technological advances. Everything from the aerodynamics of bicycles, which is something that's been evolving continuously, since the dawn of bicycles. But it seems like, now it almost seems like a price of entry for the sport. But I really try to encourage people, it's not about the bike, it's not about the stuff or the equipment. It's really ultimately comes down to the body and how you train it. But the thing, I think the things about technology that they really are becoming more accessible to people. Not necessarily, when you look at the bikes, some of the prices are exorbitant, no question, which can certainly make it seem very inaccessible to most people. But when you look at some of the technologies, like being able to subscribe to a monthly subscription to a cycling app that allows you to ride along with other people. Maybe the subscription's as little as $9.99 a month, but it lets you ride with other people virtually and kind of gather with others virtually. And you don't have to have a ton of information from your bike. You could use just even a heart rate monitor, which will still kind of model what your pace and would be based on your effort. Of course, you can go all the way up to trainers that are completely interactive and smart, as they say, where the bike trainer, which is an indoor trainer you would put your bicycle on, will adjust to the pitch of the road and and give you the feeling that you would get of riding on that particular route, whether it be on the Rockies or a flat route somewhere. So you can go absolutely all out with that kind of thing. And of course, shoe technology has kind of evolved beyond our wildest imagination. But I really kind of try to encourage athletes that I work with that ultimately it comes down to one's own fitness and one's own body and all the improvements we can make in our own fitness. And those pieces of technology are certainly a nice addition, but they're not an absolute must.
100%. And I think that's really interesting because you've worn so many of these different hats that we're able to go ahead and see it and hear it from different perspectives. Now we're going to put that organizer hat on, because I think a lot of people don't understand the legwork that goes into putting on either a road race or a triathlon. And so I'm going to talk sort of pre these tech platforms and softwares that help facilitate it. Sort of put us in the shoes of an event organizer as you were putting one of these events on. What was that like before you had a tool like PlayOn to sort of help streamline that process?
So actually, I am not even nearly brave enough to put on my own event. I totally take my hat off to anyone who has the guts and the fortitude to put on their own events. And I couldn't even begin to place myself in their esteemed company. But I will say that as having kind of gotten into this putting together a club of athletes who, we will train together, we will, get together for social events and so on. And this is only the second year I've done it, and it's only the first year I've used PlayOn. And the difference between how I did it last year versus this year is night and day. So having something that allows me to have one kind of repository where I can have everybody, register and go to one particular area to enter in their information. Then I know how to contact them. I know, I know exactly who I'm working with, as opposed to using Excel spreadsheets, which was which was how I did it before. And then having to go copy paste every time I needed to send a message or an email. That really added to my workload. Again, I will absolutely say it's nothing like what an event organizer does, but from the organization of a club perspective, I definitely feel that having a strategy and then having the resources, such as some type of software to help you, is just invaluable.
I appreciate the kind way you skirted around me thinking you were an organizer and you weren't. I appreciate that.
No problem.
And so, I'm really curious for other, active users that are listening, or folks that are running these organizations or clubs. Was the onboarding process into PlayOn, was it pretty smooth and easy for you? Or what was that journey like as you migrated from Excel into this new environment?
Yes, I actually found it very easy and a smooth process. I had the advantage of coming in with a pretty blank slate. Our club renews every January. So I wasn't in a situation where I had to import people in, manually or anything like that. And in fact, when I first heard about PlayOn, I tested it and did a bunch of things with it myself before I ever invited anybody to register. So it was actually very smooth. It was very easy to create my club. I certainly had some questions along the way, and I used the chat function to bug whoever was on the other end to answer my questions. And, for the most part, I think it has fit every one of my needs. And then when it came time, so with these triathlon clubs, we have a federation that I can't think of the right word, that basically allows us to register so that we're officially part, under their umbrella.
Yep.
And they also have a renewal process every January. So once that kicked in and I was able to renew with my federation, then I was able to say, okay, everybody, 1, 2, 3, go and register. And, once I had my live registrants, it was super smooth. I started out by registering my family as test cases. And that was really easy to, they were all very, very willing to be guinea pigs and let me send them emails, send them messages, and see what it all looks like from the user end, because that's where I usually have run into nasty surprises in the past.
Incredible. And I so appreciate your insight there, sort of as the user and the club organizer there. That's what it was built for, right? This ability to streamline, make it very user friendly, and again, agnostic of the sport, right? Never in a million years did I think a sports platform would be, from floorball and handball to triathlons to football, right? But this really does encapsulate all of that. And so, aside from Play On, I'm really curious to dive a little bit deeper in, over the last year, we've experienced COVID, and, with your background, and being in a coaching lens and being formally educated on the psychology side, where do you see things going as we start to bring sport back over, hopefully, the course of 2021?
Yes. So I'm trying to keep my kind of finger on the pulse of what's happening, in our sport and in communities where our sport is kind of, very popular and so on. I get the impression that everybody is just so excited and so ready to get back to racing in person. I completely understand that for some people, there may be some health concerns, and totally, would never push anybody to get back into it if they didn't feel comfortable. But I definitely see a real excitement about being athletic and being part of a sports community. I think, what you mentioned earlier about sport being something that is so unifying, it so brings people together. That was my experience growing up in South Africa. South Africans are sport crazy. It's like Australia, South Africa and Australia, they're sport crazy. It's such a huge part of their lives. And that's how, our social, our social circle was around my parents' running friends. That was their social circle. And, and it's very similar with triathlon. You find it's kind of a niche sport, so it draws people who are equally crazily like-minded. And I really see so much excitement from, across the board, from novice to intermediate to elite professionals who are just so excited to get back into it. And I'm hoping that what this does is that it encourages race organizers to put on more local races, because obviously there's going to be times when we can't travel, or, travel restrictions, which have been so tough. I actually put on a little mini, I couldn't really call it a race, but a little sort of mini triathlon in my home area where I live, because I live near a lake. So I said, come on, friends, let's get together and just put on our own little local event. Spoke to the local police department, and they were super supportive. And, they just kind of wanted to see people out and being active again. And I think that, once we get over the hump of this, I think you're going to see really renewed enthusiasm for just fitness, health, well-being, and a renewed appreciation for social connection.
Well, and as we're sitting behind the screen and recording this today, and this is how we've been doing it now for the last, 12 months, they say that sitting is the new smoking. And so, we're going to be needing new activities to go ahead, and whether we're biking, swimming, running, or doing all three of them, just to, again, get the blood flowing. And so what a fun time to go ahead and start to understand the triathlete circuit, how they're put on, where they're put on. So Nicole, we would love to go ahead and highlight again, Top Line Coaching out of Lubbock, Texas. We're going to go ahead and put all of the information. Hopefully I got that right.
You
did. And so as we wind down, this segment, Nicole, I like to ask everybody something sort of specific to their world. So my one question for you that you don't know is coming is, if you could tell any of the listeners one of the favorite places where you've raced that you would recommend they go either bike, run, or swim, where would that be in the world, and why?
Oh, hands down, it's Cozumel, Mexico. I know it's not super easy for just anyone and everyone to get to, but surprisingly, it's not. It's a quick flight from Dallas, so hopefully not a difficult place for people to get to. But the atmosphere, the warmth of the people, the welcoming nature of the town. I mean, Cozumel's very much a tourists, they rely very much on tourism. And so I don't know if you're familiar with, they're big into diving, and the water is like an aqua, crystal clear, It's so beautiful. It's so within reach, for us in North America. And actually, I think a ton of Europeans come for the race as well. They have a race in September and in November, and if people are able to get to it, let me tell you, it's totally unforgettable experience swimming in that ocean, in the Mexican Caribbean. It's pretty life changing. It's definitely our favorite place to race.
Wow. Well, I don't know that I should say this on Play on Nation, but I've been to Cozumel for spring break, but have never run a triathlon there. So maybe I might have to
Yeah,
go back as an adult now.
definitely.
Amazing. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for coming on and shedding some light into the amazing program that you've built out there in West Texas. We're going to periodically check in with you throughout the course of this year, just to keep our finger on the pulse of exciting things coming up in the triathlon world. But until next time, Play on Nation, tune in and be sure to follow Top Line Coaching out of Lubbock, Texas. Nicole, thank you again for coming on.